نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا ورزقا طيبا. Inshallah, today we'll be studying from ayat number 11 onwards, Surah AnNisa. These ayats are going into details about the law of inheritance in Islamic Sharia. And just to give you a few reminders before we dive into these ayats, the one is that when we study these ayats, keep in mind that they will feel a little more technical because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us actually like the fractions, the portions of how the inheritance will be divided, the wealth of a deceased should be divided. Second reminder would be that don't expect that we will become an expert by reading these few verses, because the inheritance according to Islamic Sharia is a complete department of knowledge completely, which is encouraged in Islam that we should study. According to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are supposed to teach our children the inheritance laws in Islam, because this is half the deen. Why is it half the deen? Because our deen is not just rituals and mannerisms, it is also about rights of people. And inheritance is, when you will actually read the ayats today, you will see how serious Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about following the law of inheritance as it is. So whenever there is actual need, you will find many apps also online, but you can also ask questions from scholars, because there will be many scenarios, many detailed books available, and many lectures also available about the laws of inheritance. But at the basic level, from the tafsir, I wanted to give you the taste of how very significant these rules are in Islam. The third thing that I wanted to remind you was that in these ayats also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remind repeatedly about the paying of loan of the deceased. And from the hadith we know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not pray the funeral prayer of a person who had loans that had to be paid. So unless they are paid, then so these should be taken care of before even the funeral prayer. Also related to paying the loans, there's another hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that a shaheed, a martyr, directly his soul goes into Jannah, but if that person has to pay loans, then they will still become the barrier to keep him from reaching Jannah. So paying the loan is very important. Also, again, we can see it's a right of the people, so that has to be taken care of. Islam teaches us to, Islam makes sure that we give the rights of others, and we are just, and we are not taking advantage of any situation. And then another thing is that when we are talking about debts, please keep in mind that the meher of the woman, of the wife, is also part of the loan. So if a person has passed away and he has still not paid the wife's meher, then that will be counted as the debt. So before any distribution of the wealth, according to the law of inheritance of Islam, before any of that starts, all the loans have to be paid off, and the meher of the wife is also part of the loan that should be given separately before anything else starts. Another thing that I wanted to let you know is the difference between the two words taraka or virasa, and the other word is wasiya. So taraka is the inheritance actually, which has to be divided according to the laws, to the rules given in Islam by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wasiya is called will, which is the 1/3 that a person has a say to, like how he wants to divide that. So that is optional. Everyone does not have to have that wasiya, that they want to give this 1/3 to a certain orphanage or a hospital or an adopted child or anything like that. But they have the option and they are not allowed to change the other 2/3 if they really care about giving it to a friend or somebody who is not already going to be part of the inheritors. So also keep in mind that this 1/3 cannot go towards anyone who is already going to be into the calculation where the division for inheritance will be happening. The inheritors cannot be part of that 1/3. You cannot say that 1/3 should go to my this child because he took care of me. Another thing to keep in mind is that inheritance occurs only from what a person has left after they die. It is not called inheritance when somebody decides to distribute their wealth during their lifetime. That is their own way. Still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be just. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's lots of ahadith explain to us that we should be just if we are giving any gifts even to our children. So whatever a person gives during his lifetime to his children, whether even if it is the distribution of all his properties and stuff, that will be a gift. It will not be inheritance, because inheritance has to happen exactly how Allah has instructed. So in the dunya also, if you give to your children, then you have to try to make sure that you give everyone the same level of gift, unless and until there is a very concrete reason to give more to one of the child. So sometimes it so happens that other children are doing really well financially and one of them is struggling. He does not have a good job, or he has some other life problems. So if it happens that you want to give more to that person, that is okay, unless and until there is a reasonable justification for doing that. It would also be nice if other siblings know about it and the parents have discussed or have at least given an idea to them, so there is no feeling of hostility amongst the children. Another thing to keep in mind is that many cultures think that all the money that we give at the time of marriage, the dowry that is given to a daughter, counts as the inheritance. That is not true. Dowry itself is also not Islamic in the first place. It is something that we have copied, we've adopted from the Indian culture or the Hindu culture. So that if somebody has done that, that's already not very Islamic. And secondly, it will not be counted as inheritance. You cannot say that my daughters already got their inheritance or my sisters already got the inheritance. At the passing of the parents, the daughters will get the shares exactly how Allah has instructed. So inshallah, now we will start reading from ayat number 11. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يوصيكم الله. Wow, Swadya is the root, which means instructs you, Allah, fi, concerning awladikum, your children. Wow, lam dal is the root. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs you about your children. What does Allah instruct you? Because this is a rather long ayat, this and the number 12. Still, we will not be able to become like experts by reading just these ayats. This will give us an idea of the importance of this law. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instruct us about our children? لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ هَذِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ. لِلذَّكَرِ means for the male, Zal kafara, male, mithlu, like, hazdi, hazoi, meaning the portion, unsayaini, of the two females. So male will always usually get twice that of the woman. So if the sister is getting whatever amount of share, then the brother's share would be double that amount. In the same way, the husband's portion would be double the wife's. In the same way, the son will get double the amount of the daughter. So many people don't like that. And why is that? It is because in Islamic Sharia, men have the responsibility of handling the finances. They are responsible for their daughter, for their sister, for their wife, for their mother. The daughters, the women, are not responsible to bring food on the table. So that is why the inheritance is given in twice the number. At the same time, I want to remind that this is just a kind of a Western propaganda against Islam, in the sense that we don't have enough knowledge. We don't think about how things were before Islam. In the time of ignorance, the women were not even given anything. They were actually part of the wealth that was distributed at the time of somebody's death. So they would be they would be handled like property, divided, and even the stepmoms, they were divided among the stepsons. So this is how women were dealt before Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that women also get their share. And this is what we should be grateful about, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us exact instructions. Otherwise, with the passing of time, people would just forget about it, and they would keep on, just like many people in our culture also keep thinking that dowry is already the inheritance given. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this in Quran, so we understand that this is a command. It's not a suggestion to divide the inheritance like this. Then, but if kunna, there are nisa'an, only women, fawqa, more than usnataini, two. Then if there are just daughters, if somebody has only daughters and they are more than two, then what will happen? Falahunna, then for them, thulusa, 2/3. Ma taraka, of what he left. Yani, out of the 2/3 of the wealth will be divided among all the daughters. Wa in, and if kanat, there is wahidatan, only one. So if there's only one daughter, what will happen? Falahan nisfu, then for her is half, meaning half the wealth. Now, what else is explained over here? Wali abawayhi, and for his parents. So somebody, the parents of the deceased, what will happen to them? Likulli, for each, wahidin, one, minhuma, of them. For each one of them, what will happen? As-sudusu, a sixth. Mimma, of what taraka is left. So they will get a sixth. In which situation will they get a sixth of the taraka? In kana, if is, lahu, for him, waladun, a child. So if the deceased has a child also, then the parents will get 1/6. For in, but if, lam yakun, not is, lahu, for him, for the deceased, waladun, any child. So if the deceased doesn't have any children, then what will happen? Wawarisahu, and inherited him, abawahu, his parents, fali ummihi, then for his mother, athulusu, is 1/3. Fa in, and if, kana, are, lahu, for him, ikhwatun, brothers and sisters, fali ummihi, then for his mother, as-sudus, is the 6th. So these are different situations when the fraction, the portion will change from 1/6 to 1/3, and then again to 1/6. Min ba'di, after, from, wasiyatin, any will. This is the same wasiya I'm talking about, the 1/3 that the person has a say about, that I want to give it to this person or this friend or this family relative, which is not a blood relative. So after the wasiya, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that this distribution should happen after taking care, making sure that if the person has left any wasiya, any will, then that should be given first. You see, he has made biha, of which, or dainin, or if there is any debt. So these two things should be taken care of first after the person has died. The first thing to do is to pay off the loans that he had to pay, and before any distribution of the wealth. Second thing should be done is to keep some money aside for his shroud, kafan, and burial, grave buying and all. And then third would be to see what is in the will, and that should be taken care of. And then the division of inheritance will happen. And this portion that is over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remind us again and again whenever Allah will tell us about any portion, any more rules. Allah will remind us to take care of wasiya and dain, which is the debt. Then aba'ukum, your parents, wa abna'ukum, and your children. La tadruna, not you know, أيهم, which of them, أقرب, is nearer, lakum, to you, نفعا, is in benefit. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us over here is that sometimes people would try to think that, okay, I should be living, my children should be getting more, and my parents are old and they don't need so much money or any share as such. And the person might be thinking that my parents need money more than my children do, or my siblings don't need money, and things like that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions over here that we don't know who's nearer to you for benefit, and we should not try to add our logic, our thinking, our evaluation of who should be left with more money. We just simply have to follow the portions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. Also, it means like we should just try to be beneficial for people. And in the pre-Islamic time, what used to happen is that people used to leave everything, the entire estate, entire business, all the cattle, everything for their friends. If they would really be close with their friends, they would not leave anything for their parents or their family or children, anything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us to do that. Another thing to see over here is to benefit the family is also that people sometimes when they are nearing their death, they start giving out a lot in charity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us not to leave our family, our children, our parents poor. When we die, they should benefit from us. So there's also a hadith about it where Rasulullah has highly recommended that people should not leave their children poor if possible. They should leave money or wealth for them as well. And Allah mentions faridatam min Allah. This is a farida. This is a fard, an obligation from Allah, that you cannot bring changes in that. Inna Allah, indeed Allah, kana, is aliman hakima. So he is alim, he is all knowing, he is hakim, he is all wise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the complete wisdom why whatever percentage is given for whichever relative. Allah knows why somebody's given half, somebody's given 1/6, somebody's given 1/4. This is all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has complete wisdom. Even if temporarily it doesn't make sense to us, we just have to go ahead and follow it. Then the next ayat also talks about inheritance. It talks particularly about how much the husband will get when the wife dies, and there will be again two cases, one where there are no children involved and one there when there are children involved. In the same way, how much the wives will get when the husband dies in both cases. And then Allah will remind us of the two things, which are the debt and the wasiya, the will, the 1/3. Let's read ayat number 12. Walakum, and for you, nisfu is half. This is Allah is talking to the man, the husband. Ma, of what taraka is left, azwajukum, by your zawj, by your wives. In, if, so you're supposed to get half by your wives, in which case, in, if, lam, not, yakul lahunna, is for them, waladun, a child. If that wife doesn't have any child, then you will only get half. Otherwise, for in, but if, kana lahunna, if is for them, waladun, a child, then what will happen? Falakum, then for you, ar-rubu'u, is a fourth. Mimma, of what tarakna, they left. So whatever they left, you get half, but if they have a child, then you get 1/4. Now Allah reminds us, mim badi, after from. So this should be, you will get this after what? Wasiyatin, any will, yuswina, they have made, biha, for which, aw, or the second thing is dainin, the debt. So after these two things. And now when husband dies, and what will the wives get? Walahunna, and for them, ar-rubu'u is the fourth, mimma, of what taraktum, you left. Il lam yakul lakum walad. So in the case when there is no child. In, if, lam yakun is not, lakum, for you, waladun, a child. But in the case of a child, what will happen? But if kana lakum waladun, if there is for you a child, falahunna, then for them, then for the wives, what will they get? Athumunu is the eighth. Mimma, of what taraktum you left. So without children, if the children are not involved, then the wife will get 1/4. Otherwise, she will get 1/8. In the case of the husband, he would get half, but if they will have children, then he will get 1/4. Now again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the two things. Mim badi, after, from, wasiyatin, any wasiya, any will, to suna, you have made, biha, for which, aw, or dainin, any debt. Now Allah mentions wa in, and if, kana is rajulun, a man, yurasu, whose wealth is to be inherited. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a scenario where a person has no children and no parents and no wife, so, or husband, spouse, and they have just siblings. Okay, in this case also there will be many details more than what we see over here, because the situation will be different, how many stepchildren, stepsisters and stepbrothers, so in different scenarios. So this is to give you an idea that there will also be the cases of kalala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions wa in kana, and if is rajulun, a man, yurasu, whose wealth is to be inherited, kalalatan, has no parent or child, avimra'atun, or a woman and no wife, walahu, and for him, what is for him? Akhun is a brother, aw ukhtun, or a sister. So one brother or one sister, then what will happen? Falikullif, then for each, wahidin, each one, minhuma, of the two, as-sudusu, is the sixth. So this is in case if there are only one siblings. فَإِن كَانُوا, but if they are akthara, more, min zalika, than that, fahum, then they, shuraka'u, are partners, fis-sulusi, in the third. Then they, whatever their number is, one from the 1/3 of the wealth, it will be divided among them. Bim ba'di wasiyatin, after the will, yusa was made. Yusa also has the same root, wasi, biha, for which, aw, what's the second thing? Dainin, any debt. Ghaira mudarrin, without being harmful. What does it mean? So we have to make sure that those things are taken care of first. Whatever the shares are, they should not harm the payment of the loan. So those things have to be taken care of first. Wasiyatan, an ordinance, min Allahi, from Allah. Ghaira mudarrin, so dadrara means harmful. So we're not allowed to harm this law. We are not allowed to change anything. We cannot say I'm more close to this sister or this brother or this cousin. We are supposed to not hurt the rulings over here. And because Allah mentions wasiyatan, an ordinance, this is an order, min Allahi, from Allah. And Allah ends this ayat by saying, Wallahu alimun halim. Allah is all knowing, and Allah has completely, like in the previous ayat, Allah ended by saying alim and hakim. Allah has all the complete wisdom. Over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions alim and halim, yani forbearing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the chance, gives you the time, gives you the opportunity to do the good deed by following in these steps. The next two ayahs, ayat number 13 and 14, will tell us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make us accountable. We are going to be answerable about following these rulings, because if we don't, then hellfire will be waiting for us. And if we do, then Jannah will be for us for the Akhirah. So let's read ayat number 13. Tilka, these, hududullahi, these are the hudud, these are the limits of Allah. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ, and whoever yuti', tawa'in, obeys Allah. وَرَسُولَهُ, and his messenger. Why does Allah mention the messenger over here? Why? Because many details about this law of inheritance will we will be getting from the hadith, from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So Allah mentions that these are the limits of Allah, and whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, yudkhilhu, He will admit him, jannatin, of in the Jannat. Tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. Tajri means flows. Jimraya. Min tahat, underneath them. Anhar, the rivers. And what else? They will live there forever. Khalidina fiha, they will abide forever. Wazalika, and this. Al-Fawzul Azim, and this will be the Fawz, the success, Azim, the greatest success ever. Keeping some money in this dunya will not be the greatest success. And changing your portions and percentages, just thinking that no, I think this is correct, I don't think this is correct. So whatever, if you feel that you need to give more, sometimes people become like want to be so modern and feminist. They want to say no, I want to give the same amount to my sister as well. You are allowed to do that, but only after calculating your own share, and from your share you can give it to whoever you want. If you want to give more to your sister, you have to go through the correct calculations according to the Sharia of Islam, Sharia of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the instructions in Quran. Do not go against this thinking that I know better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that following in the limits of Allah, obeying those is going to lead us to the Fawzul Azim, to the great success. But being modern in this dunya, thinking I know better, is not going to give us any success. Then ayat number 14, Waman, and whoever, ya'asi. So this is like disobeys Allah wa Rasulahu, Allah and His Messenger. So whoever disobeys, is very clear over here. وَيَتَعَدَّى, transgresses, hududahu, His limits, ha dal dal. Then what will happen? Where will he be admitted? Yudkhilhu, dal khalam, he will admit him, naran, in the fire. Khalidan fiha, he will live there forever. Khalam dal means forever. In it, walahu, and for him, azabum muhin, azab, punishment, muhin means humiliating. So he will be humiliated over there. He will have no respect over there. So the respect comes from following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not by thinking how people will perceive me in this dunya. I will look very narrow-minded. I will look like a Maulvi or whatever, because I'll be dividing the inheritance according to how Allah has explained to us. So be very careful in how things are done. Be very careful not to follow any Hinduism or any modernism or anything by dividing things according to how you feel is the right way to do it. But you're allowed to give more money to other siblings, or you can just, if you don't want to take your share, you can do that. But on the paper, first, everything should be done, calculated properly. Also, sometimes people ask questions if they can, for example, there's a family house and they don't want that to get sold because of the division of this inheritance. Then what they can do is they can buy off their share, like they can buy off the house by paying the share amount for the property if their siblings are agreeing with that. One more thing related to the ayats today is a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the learning the ilm miras, the knowledge of miras, the knowledge of inheritance, is a communal obligation, meaning it's a fardh kifaya, which means that even if everyone doesn't know it, there has to be one person among a community who should know it, so it can be implemented and benefit the entire community. So what is a communal obligation? Obligation is something like, for example, salat is an obligation which is fard on everyone to know. We all have to pray our own salah, so we all have to know how to pray, what are the timings and what are the requirements, etc., etc. But the miras, the inheritance law, is known as the ilm miras, the knowledge of the law of inheritance. It's communal obligation means that at least one person in a community, after every few people, a bunch of families, within a bunch of families, some people should know this, otherwise everyone will get the sin. And those people who learn those will get extra rewards for being part of the community and helping and benefiting everyone with this knowledge. Because if nobody knows this knowledge, nobody takes it seriously, and everyone ignores it, then what will happen is everyone will start distributing it in a wrong manner, which is going to create lots of problems in the society, and everyone will be getting into the sin of distributing the wealth in a wrong manner. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it part of our Islamic Sharia, that this is one very important part. I just want to make sure that we understand, we appreciate how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it very clear to us, even if you did not understand all the technicalities of who is getting how much, at least you got the feeling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given so much importance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given so many details, and there are further details available as we all need it. Inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.